The crystal glass trembles in 10-year-old Emma Ashford's small hands as her Aunt Margaret forces the bitter liquid down her throat. Emma's eyes water, but no sound escapes her lips. Not a cry, not a whimper, nothing. She hasn't spoken a word in 4 years. "There's my good girl," Margaret Ashford coos, her manicured fingers stroking Emma's pale cheek with false tenderness. "This medicine will help you feel better." But Emma's intelligent blue eyes tell a different story. They dart frantically toward the service entrance where a new figure appears, Dr. Keisha Williams, though no one in this Connecticut mansion knows her true identity. To them, she's just another black domestic worker, invisible and disposable. Margaret's voice cuts through the morning silence like a blade. "Emma, this black woman is here to clean and serve, that's all." Keisha's trained medical eye immediately notices Emma's dilated pupils and the slight tremor in her hands. Something is terribly wrong here. What deadly secret is hiding behind these pristine walls? The Ashford estate sprawls across 15 manicured acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, where old money whispers through ivy-covered walls and marble hallways. Every crystal chandelier, every Persian rug, every oil painting screams generational wealth. But in 10-year-old Emma's bedroom, something feels wrong. Emma Ashford should be the luckiest child alive. Heiress to a $200 million pharmaceutical fortune, she lives in a mansion that could house 50 families, yet she sits silent at her antique writing desk, sketching pictures that would disturb any trained eye, images of herself with X's drawn over her mouth, dark figures looming over her bed. "Emma has special needs," Margaret Ashford explains to the new domestic worker with practiced sympathy. At 62, Margaret embodies Connecticut aristocracy, perfectly coiffed silver hair, Hermes scarves, and a smile that never reaches her cold blue eyes. "The poor child hasn't spoken since her parents' tragic accident 4 years ago. The doctors call it selective mutism." Dr. Keisha Williams nods respectfully, but her sharp gaze catalogs details others miss. Emma's slight hand tremors, the way the girl flinches when Margaret's heels click across the hardwood. The medical equipment is subtly placed throughout the room, not for comfort, but for control. "You'll address me as Mrs. Ashford," Margaret continues, her voice carrying the weight of generations who've never questioned their superiority. "Emma requires very specific care. Her medicine must be administered precisely at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., no exceptions." Keisha has worked as a domestic for 3 years now, ever since losing her medical license. The other staff whispers about the disgraced doctor who claims she was framed, but Keisha knows the truth. She exposed pharmaceutical companies bribing pediatricians to overprescribe opioids to children. The corruption ran so deep that speaking out cost her everything, her career, her reputation, her future. "I understand completely, Mrs. Ashford," Keisha replies, keeping her voice neutral despite the familiar sting of condescension. Thomas, the elderly butler, watches this exchange with knowing eyes. He served the Ashford family for 40 years, through 3 generations of privilege and secrets. There's something he wants to say, but the words stick in his throat like so many others before them. Margaret leads Keisha through the mansion's grand rooms, each one more ostentatious than the last. "The Ashfords have been pillars of this community for over a century," she explains, stopping before a wall of family portraits. "Emma's parents were taken from us far too soon. A terrible car accident, brake failure on a mountain road." But Keisha notices what others don't. The family photos all end 4 years ago. Emma's medical equipment is too sophisticated for simple mutism, and Margaret's explanation about the accident comes with rehearsed precision. "Emma's trust fund is quite substantial," Margaret continues, her fingers drumming against an antique table. "I serve as her guardian until she turns 18. Of course, if anything were to happen to her." She lets the sentence hang in the air like smoke. Emma appears at the top of the grand staircase clutching a worn stuffed rabbit named Winston. Her pale face shows intelligence trapped behind silence, eyes that have seen too much for someone so young. When she spots Keisha, something flickers across her features, not fear, but desperate hope. "Emma, come say hello to our new help," Margaret calls out, her voice honey-sweet with underlying steel. The girl descends the stairs with careful, measured steps. Up close, Keisha's medical training kicks in automatically. Emma's pupils are slightly dilated despite the bright morning light. Her skin has an unhealthy pallor that speaks of systemic poisoning rather than grief. Most telling of all, when Margaret places her hand on Emma's shoulder, the child's entire body tenses with barely controlled terror. Emma can't speak, obviously, Margaret explains with false sadness. But she understands everything. Don't you, dear? Emma nods obediently, but her eyes find Keisha's with unmistakable intensity. In that brief moment, doctor and patient recognize each other across an invisible divide of race, class, and desperate need. I'll take excellent care of her, Keisha promises, and she means it in ways Margaret could never imagine. That evening, as Keisha unpacks her few belongings in the servants' quarters, she hides something precious at the bottom of her suitcase. A medical bag containing the tools that once saved lives. She has no idea she'll need them again soon. What secret is Emma trying so desperately to communicate? The humiliation begins on Keisha's third day when Margaret hosts her weekly charity luncheon. 12 women from Greenwich's most prestigious families gather in the sunroom, their designer handbags worth more than most people's annual salaries. They speak about the help as if Keisha were invisible, standing just 3 feet away serving cucumber sandwiches. I do hope this one works out better than the last, sighs Mrs. Pemberton, adjusting her pearl necklace. These people can be so unreliable. Well, at least she appears clean, adds Mrs. Sterling, eyeing Keisha's pressed uniform with distaste. Though I'm sure she has no real education. They rarely do. Margaret's laugh tinkles like broken crystal. Oh, our Keisha comes with excellent references, though I doubt she understands half of what we discuss here. Do you, Keisha? Keisha's jaw tightens imperceptibly, but she maintains her composure. No, ma'am. I just focus on my work. Exactly as it should be, Margaret purrs. It's so important that people know their place in society. Don't you agree, ladies? The women nod in unison, their casual cruelty as refined as their table manners. But Emma watches from the doorway, her young face flushed with anger at the injustice she's witnessing. The real horror reveals itself during Emma's evening medicine routine. Keisha observes as Margaret measures a precise dose of clear liquid into Emma's glass of milk. The girl's hands shake as she reaches for it, her eyes pleading silently for help that never comes. Drink it all down, sweetheart, Margaret coos. You know what happens when you don't take your medicine? Emma's whole body convulses as she swallows, and Keisha recognizes symptoms that make her blood run cold. Dilated pupils, muscle tremors, the pallor of systemic toxicity. This isn't medication, it's poison. When Keisha tries to approach Dr. Reynolds during his next visit, the family physician dismisses her with barely concealed contempt. I appreciate your concern, Dr. Reynolds says, his voice dripping with condescension. But perhaps you should focus on dusting and leave medical matters to those of us with actual education. Sir, I've noticed Emma exhibits signs that might indicate— Young woman, he interrupts sharply. I didn't spend 8 years in medical school to take advice from the cleaning lady. Your job is to scrub floors, not diagnose patients. Margaret appears behind them like a vulture sensing carrion. Is there a problem here, doctor? Just our help overstepping her boundaries, Dr. Reynolds explains with an indulgent smile. Sometimes these people get ideas above their station. Margaret's eyes flash with dangerous pleasure. Keisha, a word, now. In the privacy of Margaret's study, the mask finally drops. Let me make something crystal clear, Margaret hisses, her refined accent sharpening into a blade. You are nothing in this house. Less than nothing. You exist here solely because I allow it. Mrs. Ashford, I was only concerned about Emma's— You were what? Margaret's voice rises to a shriek. Concerned about my niece? You arrogant little nobody! The racial slurs come next, each one carefully chosen to wound. Margaret calls her everything but her name, her voice filled with the casual venom of someone who's never faced consequences for her cruelty. Your kind always thinks you're so smart, Margaret sneers, circling Keisha like a predator. That's why you people end up scrubbing toilets instead of contributing anything meaningful to society. You simply don't have the intelligence for real work. Keisha's hands clench into fists, but she forces herself to remain still. She's endured worse than this privileged woman's ignorance. Margaret isn't finished. I know exactly what you are. A failed nobody trying to feel important by inserting yourself where you don't belong. Well, let me educate you about your actual value. She opens her desk drawer and pulls out a manila folder. Background check, criminal history, employment verification. I know all about your little legal troubles, malpractice, fraud, drug dealing, wasn't it? The lies hit like physical blows. Keisha's throat constricts, but she won't give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her break. One phone call, Margaret continues, waving her cell phone, and you'll be in handcuffs. I own the police chief, the district attorney, and half the judges in this county. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected philanthropist or a disgraced criminal? Later that night, Keisha sits alone in her cramped quarters, staring at a hidden photograph of herself receiving the Outstanding Achievement in Pediatric Medicine Award from Johns Hopkins. In the picture, she's smiling, confident, surrounded by colleagues who respect her expertise. Now she's just the help. Her medical degree dismissed as fantasy, her concerns labeled as delusions of grandeur. But Emma is dying, and Keisha may be the only person who can see it. The next morning brings fresh cruelty. Margaret discovers missing jewelry in Keisha's room, planted evidence designed to frame her for theft. I'm disappointed but not surprised, Margaret announces to the household staff. This is exactly why we must be so careful about who we allow into our homes. Thomas shifts uncomfortably, knowing the truth but afraid to speak. The other staff avoid Keisha's eyes, already believing the worst. Please, Mrs. Ashford, Keisha says quietly. I would never— Spare me your lies, Margaret snaps. The only reason I'm not calling the police is my generous nature. But this is your final warning. One more incident and you'll be in prison where people like you belong. That evening, Emma finds Keisha crying silently in the kitchen. The girl approaches cautiously, then does something extraordinary. She takes a napkin and draws a picture of Keisha and herself holding hands, with the word friend written in careful block letters. Emma places the drawing in Keisha's hands, then points to her own chest and nods firmly. In that gesture, Keisha sees the truth Margaret is trying so desperately to hide. This child isn't mentally impaired. She's trapped, poisoned, and desperately trying to communicate the horror of her situation. The question is, how long does Emma have before Margaret's patience runs out entirely? The breakthrough comes at 2:17 a.m. when Keisha discovers Margaret in the mansion's kitchen, hunched over a mortar and pestle like some twisted alchemist. Through the crack in the door, she watches Margaret grind crystalline powder into Emma's milk glass, muttering calculations under her breath. 0.5 milligrams per kilogram body weight. Should accelerate the process nicely. Keisha's medical training kicks in instantly. Those aren't the words of a grieving aunt. They're the precise calculations of someone administering controlled doses of poison. Margaret isn't just hurting Emma. She's systematically destroying the child's nervous system with scientific precision. When Margaret disappears upstairs, Keisha moves swiftly. Using a cotton swab, she collects residue from the mortar and seals it in a small vial hidden in her apron. Her forensic pathology background screams that this is mercury-based compound designed to mimic the symptoms of degenerative neurological disease. The next morning, while Margaret attends her country club meeting, Keisha transforms the mansion's laundry room into a makeshift laboratory. Using household items, vinegar, baking soda, iodine from the first aid kit, she performs rudimentary chemical tests that would make her former Johns Hopkins colleagues proud. The results confirm her worst fears: mercury, lead acetate, thallium sulfate, a cocktail of neurotoxins that would kill slowly, appearing to medical examiners as natural neurological decline. My God, she whispers, staring at the color change reactions that reveal each deadly component. She's been poisoning this baby for years. Emma finds her there, drawn by sounds she hasn't heard in the mansion for months, the quiet confidence of competence in action. The girl's eyes widen as she watches Keisha work with scientific precision, labeling samples, recording observations in neat medical notation. For the first time in 4 years, Emma sees an adult who might actually help her. Keisha looks up to find Emma watching intently. Instead of shooing her away, she kneels to the girl's eye level. Emma, honey, can you show me something? Keisha speaks softly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to healing. Can you point to where you hurt? Emma hesitates, then slowly touches her stomach, her head, her throat. Each gesture is deliberate, communicating what words cannot. Keisha nods gravely. I understand. And I want you to know something very important. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Emma's eyes fill with tears she hasn't shed in years. Someone finally believes her pain is real. Can you draw me a picture? Keisha asks, offering paper and crayons. Show me what happened before you stopped talking. With shaking hands, Emma draws a scene that makes Keisha's blood freeze. A car on a mountain road, 2 figures in the front seat, another figure standing nearby with something in their hand, and in the corner a small girl watching from a window. You saw what really happened to your parents? Keisha breathes. Emma nods, then draws another picture, Margaret forcing medicine down her throat while she was small and healthy. The progression is clear. A happy child becomes sick, and a child becomes silent. She's been poisoning you since your parents died, hasn't she? Another nod, more emphatic this time. Keisha's mind races through treatment protocols. Chelation therapy to bind the heavy metals, activated charcoal to absorb remaining toxins, careful monitoring of liver and kidney function. Emma needs immediate medical intervention, but how can she provide it without revealing her identity? Emma, I need you to trust me, Keisha says firmly. I'm going to help you get better, but we have to be very careful. Can you be brave for me? Emma straightens her small shoulders and nods with fierce determination. That afternoon, Keisha begins Emma's treatment disguised as health supplements. She crushes chelation compounds into Emma's apple juice, claiming they're vitamins Margaret requested. She prepares activated charcoal as special chocolate milk for Emma's stomach problems. Most importantly, she begins documenting everything: Emma's symptoms, Margaret's patterns, the precise timing of poison administration. If she's going to save this child, she needs evidence that will stand up in court. But Margaret's instincts are razor sharp. She notices Emma seems more alert, less docile during their evening routine. Has anyone been giving Emma anything unusual? Margaret asks Thomas with deceptive casualness. Any different foods or drinks? Thomas shakes his head, but his nervous glance toward the kitchen doesn't go unnoticed. Margaret's eyes narrow as she processes this information. Someone is interfering with her carefully constructed plan. Who would dare challenge her authority in her own home? Margaret's suspicions crystallize when she discovers Emma humming softly while playing with her dolls, the first sound the child has made in Margaret's presence for over a year. The melody stops abruptly when Margaret enters the room, but the damage is done. Is interesting, Margaret murmurs, her voice silk wrapped around steel. Emma seems to be having fewer episodes lately. She begins her investigation with surgical precision. Security cameras appear in hallways overnight. Margaret starts timing her exits and returns, creating unpredictable schedules designed to catch staff off guard. Most tellingly, she doubles Emma's evening poison dose and watches for signs that someone might be counteracting her work. But Keisha is ready for this chess match. Years of navigating hospital politics and pharmaceutical corruption have taught her to think 3 moves ahead. She varies her treatment schedule, sometimes hiding chelation compounds in Emma's breakfast, sometimes in her afternoon snack. She teaches Emma to fake symptoms when Margaret is watching, how to make her hands tremble on command, how to appear dizzy and confused during medicine time. You're such a smart girl, Keisha whispers during one of their secret sessions. Just a little longer, and we'll have enough evidence to stop her forever. Emma nods, but points to a drawing she's made. Margaret with a phone, talking to police officers. The child understands they're racing against time. Margaret's paranoia manifests in increasingly vicious attacks on Keisha. During the Thursday Bridge Club meeting, she orchestrates a humiliation so deliberate it takes Keisha's breath away. Ladies, I need to address something rather unpleasant, Margaret announces as Keisha serves afternoon tea. I've noticed some items going missing around the house. Small things, jewelry, cash, prescription medications. The women's faces turn toward Keisha with expressions of disgust and suspicion. Mrs. Pemberton actually clutches her purse closer to her chest. Now, I'm not making accusations, Margaret continues with false reasonableness. But we all know these people have tendencies, especially ones with criminal backgrounds. Criminal backgrounds, gasps Mrs. Sterling. "Oh, yes," Margaret says, warming to her performance. "Drug dealing, from what I understand, medical fraud. Really quite shocking when you think about how we've welcomed her into our home." Keisha's hand trembles as she pours tea, but she forces herself to remain silent. Any reaction will only confirm their prejudices. "Margaret, you're so brave to give someone like that a second chance," coos Mrs. Pemberton. "Though personally, I would never allow such a person near my family." "Well, one must do one's Christian duty," Margaret replies with practiced martyrdom, "even when it puts one's own household at risk." The conversation continues for another excruciating hour, each woman contributing her own racist assumptions about Keisha's character, intelligence, and moral failings. They speak about her as if she were a dangerous animal that Margaret is heroically containing through sheer force of will. But the real blow comes that evening when Margaret corners Keisha in the kitchen. "I know you're up to something," Margaret hisses, her cultured facade completely dropped. "Emma is improving, and that's not supposed to happen." "Mrs. Ashford, I don't understand." "Don't play stupid with me." Margaret's voice rises to a shriek. "You think because you can read medical journals online that you know something about medicine? You're nothing but an ignorant ghetto rat pretending to be smart." The racial slurs flow like acid, each one designed to strip away Keisha's dignity and self-worth. Margaret calls her every degrading name she can think of, her voice filled with generations of inherited hatred. "I should have listened to my instincts about your kind," Margaret snarls. "Always scheming, always trying to steal what belongs to better people. Well, let me tell you something, you worthless piece of trash." Margaret's phone appears in her manicured hand. "One call to immigration, and you'll be deported. One call to the police, and you'll be in prison. One call to my lawyer, and you'll never work anywhere in this country again." She leans closer, her breath hot against Keisha's ear. "I own you now. Your life, your future, your freedom. All of it belongs to me. And if you interfere with Emma's treatment one more time, I'll destroy you so completely that no one will even remember your name." But Margaret has made a crucial mistake. In her fury, she's revealed the truth about Emma's treatment. She's admitted that Emma's improvement is a problem that needs to be stopped. That night, Keisha makes a decision that will change everything. Using skills learned during her forensic pathology residency, she installs a tiny recording device inside Emma's beloved stuffed rabbit, Winston. If Margaret is going to confess to murder, Keisha will make sure it's documented. The next morning brings Margaret's most sophisticated attack yet. She plants a bottle of prescription opioids in Keisha's room, then calls the police to report suspected drug dealing on her property. "I hate to do this," Margaret tells Officer Morrison with tears streaming down her face. "But I have a responsibility to my community. This woman has been stealing medications and possibly selling them to local addicts." Officer Morrison, a longtime family friend, nods sympathetically. "Don't worry, Mrs. Ashford. We'll handle this quietly. These people need to learn they can't prey on decent families like yours." The search is humiliating and deliberate. 2 officers tear through Keisha's meager possessions while Margaret watches with satisfaction. When they find the planted evidence, Margaret gasps in perfectly rehearsed shock. "I trusted her with my vulnerable niece," Margaret sobs. "How could I have been so naive?" But Emma witnesses the entire charade from the top of the stairs. And that evening, in the privacy of her room, she does something extraordinary. Using crayons and paper, she draws a detailed picture of Margaret planting the drugs in Keisha's room. Then she hides the drawing inside Winston, right next to Keisha's recording device. The next morning, Margaret appears in Keisha's doorway with a triumph smile. "Pack your things," she announces. "You have 1 hour before the police return with a warrant for your arrest." But Emma appears beside her aunt. No longer the silent, docile child Margaret has been slowly murdering. Her eyes blaze with intelligence and fury as she stares at her would-be killer. Margaret suddenly realizes that something fundamental has changed in the last few weeks. Has she underestimated everyone in this house? The confrontation erupts at 8 p.m. sharp during Emma's evening medicine routine. Margaret enters the child's bedroom carrying a syringe filled with enough concentrated mercury to kill Emma within hours. Her patience for slow poisoning has finally run out. "Time for your special medicine tonight, darling," Margaret coos, her voice honey-sweet with murderous intent. "This will make all your problems go away forever." Emma sits rigid on her bed, clutching Winston the rabbit with white knuckles. She's been waiting for this moment, coached by Keisha on exactly what to do. But as Margaret approaches with the lethal injection, Keisha steps from behind the bedroom door. "Step away from the child, now!" Margaret whirls around, her face contorting with rage. "How dare you enter Emma's room without permission? Get out before I call the police!" "I don't think so," Keisha says calmly, her entire demeanor transformed. Gone is the subservient domestic worker. In her place stands someone with unmistakable authority and expertise. "Put down the syringe, Margaret. It's over." "You're just the help!" Margaret shrieks, but uncertainty flickers in her eyes. "You're nothing. A criminal. A drug dealer." Keisha reaches into her apron and pulls out her hidden medical bag, the one containing instruments that once saved countless lives. "No, Margaret. I'm Dr. Keisha Williams, Johns Hopkins Medical School, class of 1995, board-certified in pediatric medicine and forensic pathology." The syringe wavers in Margaret's hand as the impossible truth hits her. "You're lying. You're just a maid. Just another ignorant—" "I specialized in toxicology cases," Keisha continues, her voice cutting through Margaret's denial like a scalpel. "I can identify mercury poisoning from across a room. Lead acetate leaves distinctive neurological markers. And thallium sulfate? That causes the exact tremors I've been observing in Emma for weeks." Margaret's face goes white as Keisha pulls out a manila folder thick with evidence. "I've documented everything," Keisha says, spreading laboratory reports across Emma's dresser. "Tissue samples, chemical analysis, dosage calculations. I know exactly what you've been doing to this child, and I can prove it." "No one will believe you!" Margaret's voice cracks with desperation. "You're a disgraced criminal! I'm a pillar of this community!" Emma chooses this moment to speak, her voice clear and strong for the first time in Margaret's presence in 4 years. "She saved my life," Emma says, sitting up straighter. "Dr. Keisha has been treating me, making me better, undoing what you did to me." Margaret staggers backward as if physically struck. The silent, docile child she's been systematically destroying for years is speaking with perfect clarity. "You were poisoning me," Emma continues, her young voice steady and accusatory. "Just like you poisoned Mommy and Daddy. I saw you that night on the mountain road. I saw you cut their brake lines." "That's impossible," Margaret whispers. "You were unconscious. The trauma made you forget." "I remembered everything," Emma says. "I just couldn't say it, until Dr. Keisha helped me find my voice again." Keisha steps forward, her medical bag open to reveal instruments that speak of years of training and expertise. "I lost my license because I exposed pharmaceutical companies bribing doctors to overprescribe opioids to children. The corruption ran so deep that speaking out cost me everything." She pulls out a stethoscope, its metal gleaming with professional authority. "But I never stopped being a doctor, and when I saw what you were doing to Emma, I couldn't stand by and watch another child suffer." Margaret lunges forward with the syringe, but Keisha is ready. Years of emergency room experience have taught her to react instantly to violence. She catches Margaret's wrist, applying pressure to a nerve point that makes the syringe clatter to the floor. "I took an oath," Keisha says, restraining the struggling woman. "First, do no harm. That includes stopping people like you." Thomas appears in the doorway, no longer the silent, fearful butler. In his hands is a recording device that's been capturing every word. "I've been documenting your crimes for months, Mrs. Ashford," he says quietly. "Waiting for someone brave enough to act. Dr. Williams gave me that courage." Margaret's world crumbles as she realizes the full scope of her exposure. The ignorant maid she's been tormenting is a medical expert. The simple child she's been poisoning is a witness to murder. The loyal servant she's controlled through fear has been gathering evidence against her. "You were so busy looking down on us," Keisha says, "that you never looked closely enough to see who we really were." But Margaret has one final, desperate card to play. Margaret's desperate laughter fills the room like the sound of breaking glass. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of." She reaches into her designer purse and pulls out a second syringe, this one filled with a milky substance that makes Keisha's blood run cold. Concentrated fentanyl, enough to kill everyone in the room within minutes. "If I can't have Emma's inheritance," Margaret snarls, her mask of refinement completely shattered, "then no one can. We'll all die together, and the world will blame the drug-dealing maid who snapped and murdered an innocent family. Emma scrambles backward on her bed, but there's nowhere to run. Thomas tries to step forward, but Margaret waves the deadly syringe at him like a weapon. "Stay back, all of you!" Margaret's voice has devolved into an animalistic shriek. 20 years I've planned this! 20 years of waiting for that sanctimonious brother of mine to die so I could claim what should have been mine from the beginning! Her confession pours out in a torrent of rage and entitlement. David always got everything, the inheritance, the company, the respect. Just because he was born male, well, I showed him who was really superior when I cut his brake lines on that mountain road. Margaret's eyes gleam with psychotic satisfaction as she relives her triumph. You should have seen the look on his face when he realized the brakes weren't working. Pure terror, just like what you're feeling right now. Keisha raises her hands in a calming gesture, her medical training taking over. Margaret, listen to me. You're having a psychotic break. Let me help you. Help me! Margaret's laugh is completely unhinged now. The way you helped Emma, you destroyed everything. My inheritance, my reputation, my perfect plan. She advances on Emma with the syringe raised, her movements predatory and calculated. I'll start with the little brat who's caused me so much trouble, then the butler who betrayed me, and finally, the uppity witch who thought she could outsmart her betters. I've been poisoning this child for 4 years, Margaret continues, savoring each word like fine wine. Mercury in her morning milk, lead acetate in her vitamins, thallium in her evening medicine. Watching her slowly deteriorate was almost artistic. Thomas gasps in horror at the casual cruelty of Margaret's words, but she's not finished. The best part was watching those incompetent doctors scratch their heads over her mysterious illness. Margaret laughs. Not one of them suspected systematic poisoning. They just accepted that the poor little rich girl had bad genetics. As Margaret lunges toward Emma with the syringe, the child does something extraordinary. With reflexes sharpened by weeks of Keisha's coaching, Emma rolls off the bed and activates a hidden panic button that Keisha installed days earlier. Instantly, sirens begin wailing in the distance. You called the police? Margaret whirls on Emma with murderous fury. No, Keisha says calmly. I called the FBI. Margaret's face goes ashen as the implications hit her. The FBI? Federal agents have been investigating pharmaceutical fraud connected to your family's company for months, Keisha explains, keeping her voice steady despite the deadly weapon in Margaret's hand. I contacted them 3 days ago with evidence of systematic child abuse and murder. You're lying, Margaret's voice cracks with desperation. Agent Rodriguez should be walking through your front door right about now, Keisha continues, along with a forensic toxicology team, a child protective services specialist, and enough evidence to put you away for life. The sound of heavy boots on marble stairs confirms Keisha's words, but Margaret's response is to become even more dangerous. Then I have nothing left to lose, she screams, raising the fentanyl syringe high above Emma's cowering form. If I'm going down, I'm taking all of you with me. Keisha doesn't hesitate. She launches herself across the room, her body colliding with Margaret's in a desperate attempt to protect the child. The two women crash into Emma's antique dresser, sending medical equipment and evidence files scattering across the floor. The syringe flies from Margaret's hand, rolling under the bed as both women fight desperately for control. Margaret may be older, but she's fueled by the desperation of someone facing life in prison. Her manicured nails rake across Keisha's face, drawing blood as she tries to reach the fallen weapon. I'll kill all of you, Margaret pants, her perfectly styled hair now wild with exertion. Starting with this worthless little witness. She manages to grab a heavy crystal paperweight from the floor, raising it above Keisha's head with killing intent. The weight could easily crush a skull, and Margaret's face shows she intends exactly that outcome. But Emma, no longer the passive victim she's pretended to be for years, acts with startling courage. The 10-year-old girl grabs Margaret's wrist with both hands, using her small body weight to throw off the older woman's balance. Don't hurt Dr. Keisha! She saved my life! Emma's voice rings out clear and strong, filled with fierce protectiveness for the woman who risked everything to help her. The distraction gives Keisha the opening she needs. Using techniques learned during her medical residency in some of Baltimore's most dangerous neighborhoods, she applies a sleeper hold that cuts off blood flow to Margaret's brain. The wealthy socialite goes limp within seconds, but their victory is short-lived. In the struggle, the fentanyl syringe has been damaged, and its deadly contents are seeping into the air through a crack in the plastic. The concentrated drug begins affecting everyone in the enclosed bedroom. Emma shows the first signs of respiratory distress, shallow breathing, blue lips, dilated pupils. Her small body is more vulnerable to the airborne toxin than the adults. "Emma!" Keisha drops Margaret's unconscious form and rushes to the child. "Baby, stay with me!" The girl's breathing becomes increasingly labored as fentanyl fumes fill the enclosed bedroom. Without immediate medical intervention, she'll be dead within minutes. Thomas stumbles toward the door, but his movements are already becoming sluggish from exposure. Keisha's training kicks into overdrive. She grabs her medical bag and pulls out a preloaded naloxone injector, the one piece of emergency equipment she's carried everywhere since losing her license, just in case she encountered an overdose situation. "This is going to hurt for a second, sweetheart," she tells Emma, finding a vein in the child's small arm with the expertise of thousands of successful procedures. "But it's going to save your life." The naloxone injection works within seconds, reversing the fentanyl's effects and allowing Emma to breathe normally again. But the exertion and stress have taken their toll on the girl's already poisoned system. "My chest hurts," Emma whispers, her hand clutching at her heart with genuine distress. Keisha's stethoscope reveals what she feared most: cardiac arrhythmia caused by months of heavy metal poisoning, triggered by the stress of the near-death experience. Emma's heart is failing, its rhythm chaotic and dangerous. "Thomas!" Keisha shouts to the butler, who's been standing frozen in the doorway, fighting off his own fentanyl exposure. "Call an ambulance! Tell them we have a pediatric cardiac emergency!" But the ambulance is still minutes away, and Emma's heart could stop at any moment. Keisha has no choice but to perform emergency cardiac intervention using improvised equipment in a bedroom that's becoming a crime scene. She tears open Emma's nightgown and begins chest compressions, counting under her breath as she works to maintain circulation. Her hands move with practiced precision, applying exactly the right pressure for a child's fragile ribcage. "Come on, baby. Your heart is strong. You've been fighting for years. Don't stop now." Margaret begins to regain consciousness, groggy but still dangerous. "Let her die," she mumbles through swollen lips, blood trickling from where she bit her tongue during the struggle. "Just let it end. Save us all the trouble." "Never," Keisha says fiercely, continuing the life-saving compressions while monitoring Emma's pulse with her free hand. "I didn't fight this hard to lose her now." Federal agents finally burst through the bedroom door, led by Agent Rodriguez and a full tactical team. They find a scene that tells the entire story: Margaret Ashford surrounded by evidence of her crimes, Dr. Keisha Williams performing emergency medicine on a dying child, and Thomas holding a recording device that captures 4 years of systematic murder. "Agent Rodriguez, FBI," the lead agent announces, his weapon trained on Margaret's prone form. "Margaret Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and the murders of David and Sarah Ashford." But Keisha barely hears the arrest. All her focus remains on Emma, whose heartbeat is slowly stabilizing under her expert care. The child's eyes flutter open, focusing on Keisha's face with absolute trust and love. "Dr. Keisha," Emma whispers, her voice barely audible but filled with gratitude. "Are we safe now?" "Yes, baby," Keisha says, tears streaming down her face as she continues monitoring Emma's vital signs. "We're safe, you're safe, and you're going to be completely healthy again." As EMTs rush into the room with professional equipment, Keisha steps back to let them work. But Emma reaches out and grabs her hand with surprising strength for someone who nearly died twice in one evening. "Don't leave me," the girl pleads, her eyes wide with the fear of abandonment. "Never," Keisha promises, squeezing the small hand gently. "I'll be right here beside you. Always." Agent Rodriguez approaches with handcuffs for Margaret, who is now fully conscious and spitting curses at everyone in the room. "Dr. Williams, we're going to need your testimony, but first, thank you. Without your evidence and courage, we never could have built this case." As Margaret is led away in shackles, she turns back for one final venomous attack. "You think you've won? You're still nothing but a worthless—" Her racist tirade is cut off by Emma's clear, strong voice. She's not nothing. She's my hero, and she's going to be my mother. The last thing Margaret Ashford sees before being removed from the mansion forever is Emma Ashford, alive, speaking, and protected by the woman she tried so desperately to destroy. In the end, who really possessed the power in this deadly game? 6 hours later, Emma Ashford sits in a pristine hospital bed, her small hand intertwined with Dr. Keisha Williams's, as a team of specialists confirms what Keisha already knew. The child will make a complete recovery. The chelation therapy you administered was textbook perfect, Dr. Patterson tells Keisha with genuine admiration. You quite literally saved her life. The heavy metal levels were approaching fatal concentrations. Agent Rodriguez enters with an update that brings closure to 4 years of hidden horror. Margaret Ashford has been formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for her brother and sister-in-law's deaths, attempted murder of a minor, systematic child abuse, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Emma squeezes Keisha's hand tighter. What about my inheritance? Fully protected, Agent Rodriguez assures her. The courts are fast-tracking your case. You'll need a new guardian, of course. Emma looks up at Keisha with eyes full of hope and love. I know exactly who I want. The legal proceedings move with unprecedented speed once the evidence becomes public. Margaret's recorded confessions, combined with Keisha's detailed toxicology reports and Thomas's hidden surveillance footage, create an airtight case that makes national headlines. Millionaire's daughter saved by a woman she called just the help reads the front page of every major newspaper. The story becomes a lightning rod for discussions about racism, classism, and the courage to do what's right regardless of personal cost. Dr. Reynolds, the family physician who dismissed Keisha's concerns, faces medical review for his failure to detect systematic poisoning. His license is suspended pending investigation. Detective Morrison, Margaret's golfing partner who tried to arrest Keisha, resigns in disgrace when his biased handling of the case becomes public knowledge. Most importantly, the Connecticut Medical Board holds an emergency session and unanimously votes to restore Dr. Keisha Williams's medical license with full honors. The pharmaceutical corruption case that originally cost her career is reopened, leading to criminal charges against the executives who framed her. Justice delayed is not justice denied, the medical board chairman announces. Dr. Williams's courage in exposing corruption 4 years ago and her heroism in saving Emma Ashford's life exemplify the highest ideals of our profession. In her hospital bed, Emma watches the news coverage with wonder. Dr. Keisha, you're famous. Keisha smiles, smoothing the girl's hair. No, sweetheart. We're free, and that's worth more than fame. But their greatest victory is yet to come. 1 year later, the transformation is complete and breathtaking. The Emma Ashford Center for Child Protection stands where Margaret's Country Club once hosted bridge games for Connecticut's elite. The sprawling facility houses a state-of-the-art medical clinic, forensic laboratory, and safe house for children escaping abuse. A bronze plaque at the entrance reads, "Dedicated to giving voice to the voiceless." Dr. Keisha Williams, now the center's chief medical officer, reviews case files in her office, the same room where Margaret once planned Emma's murder. The walls display her restored medical degrees alongside photos of the children she's helped save. Her patient roster has grown to include hundreds of young victims whose mysterious illnesses were actually systematic poisoning. Dr. Keisha, your 3 o'clock is here, announces her assistant. Through the window, Keisha watches 11-year-old Emma Ashford emerge from a limousine, no longer the silent, terrified child of a year ago. Emma moves with confidence, her voice clear and strong as she greets the center's staff. How many children did we help this month? Emma asks, settling into the chair across from Keisha's desk with the ease of a seasoned advocate. 43 confirmed cases of abuse, Keisha reports. Thanks to the protocols we developed, medical professionals across the country are now trained to recognize systematic poisoning disguised as chronic illness. Emma nods seriously. She's become the face of child protection advocacy, testifying before Congress about the need for better detection systems. Her articulate, passionate speeches have moved senators to tears and resulted in landmark legislation known as the Emma Ashford Child Protection Act. Tomorrow's testimony is ready, Emma says. pulling out her prepared statement. "I want to tell them about Marcus, the boy from Chicago whose stepfather was poisoning him with antifreeze. How the doctors missed it for 2 years until they learned our detection methods. The case that made national headlines showcases how far their impact has spread. A pediatrician in Illinois, trained using the Ashford Protocol, identified systematic poisoning that local authorities had missed. The child survived. The perpetrator was convicted. 67 children were saved using techniques developed at this center," Keisha says with quiet pride, each one a voice that might have been silenced forever. Their success has transformed the surrounding community as well. Greenwich's exclusive social circles, once dominated by Margaret's friends, now find themselves under scrutiny. Mrs. Pemberton and Mrs. Sterling, who once dismissed Keisha as inherently inferior, now volunteer at the center, their attitudes permanently changed by witnessing the consequences of their prejudices. Thomas, promoted to head of security, maintains detailed records of every case. His experience hiding evidence of Margaret's crimes now serves a righteous purpose, protecting vulnerable children and documenting their recoveries. "The Connecticut State Police want to consult on 3 new cases," Thomas reports during their weekly meeting. "Apparently, Margaret's methods were more widespread than we thought. She taught other wealthy families how to eliminate inconvenient heirs. The ripple effects continue expanding. Detective Morrison's replacement, Captain Sarah Martinez, has revolutionized the department's approach to investigating upstanding citizens. New protocols require extensive medical review for any child death in wealthy families, closing loopholes that predators like Margaret exploited for generations. Margaret Ashford herself sits in maximum security prison, serving life without parole. Appeals courts have repeatedly denied her requests for reduced sentences, particularly after additional victims came forward. 3 other children from prominent families died under suspicious circumstances during her years of freedom, cases now being reopened as homicides. She thought she was untouchable because of her wealth and connections, Emma reflects, reviewing news coverage of Margaret's latest failed appeal. But evil is evil, no matter how much money it hides behind. Dr. Keisha Williams has been nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to child protection, but she measures success differently, in the laughter echoing through the center's halls, in the medical students learning to detect hidden abuse, in the families reunited after truth replaces lies. Most importantly, the legal proceedings have culminated in Emma's formal adoption. Dr. Keisha Williams is now officially Emma's mother, their bond forged through shared trauma and mutual rescue. "Ready for dinner, Mom?" Emma asks, using the title that still fills Keisha's heart with joy. "Always, baby girl, always." As mother and daughter walk hand in hand through the center's gardens, their story illuminates a truth that echoes far beyond these walls. Sometimes the person society dismisses as just the help turns out to be exactly the hero we need most. Margaret Ashford saw a black domestic worker and assumed ignorance. She saw poverty and assumed inferiority. She saw someone forced into service and assumed powerlessness. Her prejudices blinded her to the brilliant doctor standing right in front of her, the very person with the expertise to expose her crimes and save her victim. This willful blindness cost Margaret everything: her freedom, her fortune, her facade of respectability. More importantly, it saved Emma's life and hundreds of other children who might have suffered in silence. The deeper message resonates across every community. We are surrounded by hidden heroes whose true worth society refuses to recognize. The immigrant taxi driver might be a former surgeon. The hotel housekeeper might hold advanced degrees. The store clerk might possess expertise that could change lives, if only someone bothered to listen. Emma Ashford learned this lesson at age 10 when she discovered that salvation wore the uniform of a domestic worker. Dr. Keisha Williams embodied it when she chose to act despite knowing the personal cost. Their story proves that courage isn't about having power. It's about using whatever abilities you possess to protect those who need protection. In a world that judges worth by appearance, be the person who sees beneath the surface. In a society that silences the vulnerable, amplifies their voices. When institutions fail to protect the innocent, sometimes ordinary people must step forward and do extraordinary things. Think about the people in your life who are overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. What wisdom might they possess? What experiences could teach you something valuable? What voices need amplifying in your community? The next time you encounter someone society tells you to ignore, remember Emma and Keisha. Remember that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear uniforms. Sometimes they speak with accents. Sometimes they've been knocked down by systems designed to keep them there. But they get back up. They persist. They save lives when others walk away. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Start conversations about bias, about assumptions, about the courage required to see truth even when it challenges everything you thought you knew. Subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary courage of ordinary people. Stories that remind us who we can be at our best and who might be standing right beside us, waiting for someone to finally see their true worth. Because sometimes the smallest voice carries the most powerful truth.